right. So as I said, I set out 3 years ago with a white sheet of paper. How are we going to build business cases actually for blockchain networks? And when I look back now over all the experience I've had with all the networks in the early stages of startup that I've worked with, I think there are really 3 big areas where I think building a business case for a blockchain network is different than any other technology. I mean, the way you build a financial case, all of that basic stuff is still there, but there are 3 things that are different. The first thing that's different is what I'm calling incentive model. So the idea here is we're actually going to have to build 3 different types of business cases which are going to have to interrelate and create reinforcing behavior. So each of these is driving a common behavior to push in the same direction. So if we look at those three cases, well, first of all, we need a strong case for whatever entity is going to be bringing this network to market. And there are a whole load of options as to who could bring this network to market. And again, I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But they really need to have a solid financial incentive, a solid case to take this to market. So that's the first category of case. The second category of case are for the members themselves. And clearly we're going to have a whole bunch of different types of members. You might have banks, you might have insurance companies, you might have logistics service providers, ports, customs. Each of these needs to have a reason. What's in it for me? They need to have a strong business case. And you may find that this member has great benefits, so we can charge them a great fee to join this network. You may find that this member actually is so valuable to the network. They have such great gravitational pull. They bring so many other folks onto the network. They have such great data that you may give them access to the network for free. So an example there would be if you look at TradeLens, the Port of Rotterdam, for example, you're not going to charge those guys a fee to join the network because they have such great gravitational pull to help you build out your network. And then the third category would be somebody who provides useful data to the network, but actually doesn't get a great benefit from the network. So if you don't build an incentive for them, then those guys are not going to play and your network just isn't going to work. I think one of the nice things about the governance of the network is that the governing body plays the role of defining the marketplace rules. So, one example I'm going to talk about later are utility tokens, where you can create an incentive to drive a behavior change that you need and a reward that you need. So I've kind of been in workshops, where I've seen guys who are starting to define these rules, and I've said, look, you guys are shaping the market here. You really do need to be careful, and you need to make sure that you find a pragmatic balance between getting stuff done and then putting in place a governance mechanism that is fair and democratic to everybody, so that everybody gets a fair chance and a fair cut at things.
Indeed, because if you start acting more like Zeus, you're going to have a lot of trouble getting other players to join your network.
Exactly. So we're trying to find that sweet spot. Now, I said there were 3 kinds of things that were really different about building a business case for blockchain. And the second thing is network effect. It's no use to me if I've got 1 transaction in 100 going through the blockchain. That's an experiment, right? It only becomes really interesting to me if I can take a segment of my business and if I can get, let's say, half of that going through the network, or ideally all of it going through the network. Now, the problem here is this is a peer-to-peer thing. So I need the guy on the other side of the trade, all my trading partners, to be on the same network as me. So we're looking to identify who are the folks that are going to bring the most transactions and the most volumes to the network, and try to recruit those guys first, because we're looking to seize a market, really. And the whole point of this first phase of the adoption of blockchain is to capture that market, to then give us the foundations upon which to then innovate on top in our new marketplace. Now, one thing, which is really important, just to remind everybody, is that when we talk about network effects, this is not like Facebook, you join Facebook because everybody else is in Facebook. Because here you've got one person, Facebook, who is controlling that data. And if you remember, the answer from the first question, the key thing that we're doing here is that there is not one party that is owning and driving that governance and monetization of the data. So that's really, if there's just one thing that we're changing, it's that's the key thing. So we need to be driving those network effects so we can capture that market, so you can then have all of your transactions, or at least a large part of your transactions, going through this new pipe.
And I'm assuming the incentive, for having those transactions, as much of it on your network, comes back to your first point of having a correct incentivization model.
Exactly. I mean, if there's just one thing that I think is absolutely fundamental to the success of a blockchain, it's getting that incentive model right. And I see that as a primary role of governance, actually, or at least the strategic element of governance, is to design those marketplace rules, acting as a community, and to design a fair model where everybody has a fair incentive to wish to increase the volume of transactions on the market. So this is an area of that collaboration.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, as you probably know, we've done a fair amount of governance podcasts on intra-blogs, and the thing that keeps striking me is that governance is not new. We've had governance throughout human history and different models of it. You look even at Switzerland, and the way it governs itself as a state or in the region. So it's not something new that we as a blockchain community need to create from scratch.
Absolutely. But I think one thing which I think is different is this need to find a balanced incentive model where you are trying to drive changed behavior at the level of an ecosystem. Now, I said there were three big things that were different about building a business case for a blockchain network. The third thing is you really need to be driving your thinking at the level of a market. We're looking to seize a market with this now. And certainly, the thinking that I'm seeing emerging is probably these markets will be driven by zones of regulation. So you'll have a blockchain network sitting here in the EU within their rules and compliance. You'll have another one in the US or another one in AP, whatever. But obviously, because these are networks for business, we need to be compliant. And we're looking to get as much network effect as we can. So I think then those are the three big things that you need to do differently. I think we need to be thinking about an incentive model to drive the correct behavior of each of those three groups. So that's the folks who bring the network to market, each of the network member types, and then critically innovators on the network. So these are service providers who may be bringing technical resources to the network in terms of bandwidth, compute, storage, so driving the growth of the network, or critically, third-party innovators driving these new value propositions, these third-party value propositions, and new digital products and services on the marketplace. So we need to be driving network effects, and we need to be thinking at the level of a market. So, these are kind of the three big things, I think, which we need to have top of mind, which are different about building a financial justification for a blockchain network as opposed to more traditional technology.
That's a great answer. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, in terms of the